Perhaps you're an employee that has been dismissed or terminated. Maybe you're thinking of suing your employer either before being terminated or after having been terminated. Or maybe you're actually being sued by your employer after you've been fired. One of the first things that you and your lawyer should do is to send a written letter to the employer making demand for your entire personnel file. California law allows employees to demand copies of their personnel file and also copies of all of their wage statements from their current or former employer. When an employer receives such a letter, that's typically the first sign or shot across the bow that the employee may be considering litigation against the employer. Such letters should expressly ask for the entire personnel file, including applications for employment, payroll authorization form, notices of commendation, warning, discipline, and/or termination, notices of layoff, leave of absence and vacation, notices of wage attachment or garnishment, education and training notices and records, performance appraisals and reviews, and attendance records, among other things. In addition, the letter should expressly ask for production of any instrument relating to the obtaining or holding of employment, which would include all documents signed by the employee in connection with employment with that employer. Typically, the employer has 30 calendar days from receipt of this written request to produce those items, with the exception that wage statements are due even earlier, 21 calendar days from the date the request is received by the employer. The employer must produce all wage statements. The reason it's prudent to request these records early in the process is because these records will provide the employee with what is basically tantamount to free discovery in a very cost-effective manner. For example, the wage statements may disclose claims for wage and hour violations that the employee may not even be fully aware of, but that the employee's lawyer can utilize in formulating a case against the employer. In addition, you'll want to know all the documents that the employee signed, because those documents may include, for example, arbitration requirements, and you'll want to be aware of those before you run out and file a lawsuit in court. Documents signed by the employee may also disclose certain obligations that the employee has to the employer that it's best to know about before you rush out and initiate litigation. For example, there may be obligations in those documents prohibiting certain activities by the employee after termination. You'll want to know about those before you pick a fight with the employer, because if you're not careful, the employer may file a cross complaint back against you. Unlike discovery that can get very expensive and time consuming and could result in motion practice, this sort of pre-litigation demand letter is not subject to a lot of room for delay or gameplay or hiding the ball. The employer must comply and must comply in a speedy fashion. So this is a very useful tool that should not be overlooked by the employee. While employees could theoretically send such a letter on their own behalf without a lawyer, it is advisable for employees to send these letters through competent labor and employment counsel. These letters tend to get the attention of the employer, especially when it's coming from a respected lawyer or law firm, and could result in early mediation or resolution of your dispute in that scenario. If it's coming directly from the employee, it usually carries less weight, although the employer must still comply with the requirements therein. This presentation is intended only for educational purposes and is not to be relied upon as legal advice, nor is it a solicitation of business. If you believe that you may have an action against your employer and you would like to obtain a free legal consultation, you may reach out to Benjy Law Corporation at 310-203-2650 That's 203-2650. And you're also encouraged to visit our website at www.benjylaw, that's BENJY like yellow, LAW.com for more information. Thanks for listening.